Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul.
Thank you, Rabbi Dana. We are back, Rabbi Jason Levine, Rabbi Dana Benson, and me, Rabbi Ruth Slotnick, as we come to Yom Kippur afternoon, as the day increases and we are ready now to bring in the words, the sacred values of our ancestors as we read Torah together. This is our afternoon Seder Kriyat HaTorah, our service for reading Torah. And unlike other services throughout this season, what we have found is that we do need to limit the number of participants we have to stay COVID safe. So we are blessed with having Rabbi Jason and Rabbi Dana offer us the sacred words of our ancestors. And so without further ado, we'll continue. If you would like, I invite you at home to rise if you are able, because we are ready to open the Ark and read Torah.
Ki mitzion tetze Torah, ki mitzion tetze Torah, udvar Adonai mi Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Le'amo Yisrael Bikdushato.
And if you'd like to join me, I'm on page 328 of the Machzor, the Yom Kippur prayer book. It shall come to pass in the fullness of time that the mountain of the house of God shall be established as the highest mountain and raised above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Then many people shall say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Eternal, to the house of the God of Jacob. And they shall say, Teach us your ways, that we may walk in your paths. We give thanks today for a Torah of life, the way of kindness, mercy, and truth. And let us be strong in this perilous world. Let us open our hearts to the path of Torah.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo. Lecha Adonai hagevura v'hagevura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod, ki chol v'shamayim u'va'aretz, l'chol v'shamayim u'va'aretz, lecha Adonai hamlacha ve'amit naseh l'chol rosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu.
Thank you both. Our Torah reading on this Yom Kippur afternoon is from the section of the book of Leviticus called the Holiness Code. You can join us in the Machzor, in your High Holiday Prayer Book or flip book, on page 339. These words form the moral backbone of our Jewish people, how we are to treat others, provide aid for the struggling and marginalized, care for others beyond ourselves. The final verse that we read, the most famous verse of the Holiness Code, is emblazoned over the entrance to Beth Am Sanctuary, for us to always walk under and remind ourselves to love others as ourselves. A fundamental value of this, our Beth Am community. These words are crucially important today as we engage in the work of loving those around us and turning that love into direct advocacy, action, and support. We'll be reading Leviticus chapter 19, verses 15 through 18, the core of the Holiness Code, the heart of the Torah. Again, page 339.
And since Rabbi Jason is going to be reading from the Torah for us, he's also going to honor us with the blessing before and after the Torah, the Aliyah blessing. But it's only because if you were all here, we would have you doing the blessings with us. So we invite you, if you are someone who learned something about holiness in the past year, we invite you to say the blessing along with Rabbi Jason as we call all of you to Torah. Ya'amod harav Shimon Ephraim ben Avram ve'Batya ve'kol ha'am le'aliyah rishona.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Lo ta'asu avel b'mishpat, lo tisa p'nei dal, v'lo tedar p'nei gadol, ketzedek tishpot amitecha, lo telech rachil b'mecha, lo ta'amod al dam reyecha, ani Adonai, lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, Ocheach tohiach et amitecha, v'lo tisa alav chet, lo tikom v'lo titor, et b'nei amecha, v'ahavta l'reecha kamocha, ani Adonai. In the blessing, then we'll do the English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, V'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Translation from the Torah Women's Commentary. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kin fairly. Do not deal basely with members of your people. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am Adonai. You shall not hate your kinfolk in your hearts. Reprove your kin, but incur no guilt upon their accounts. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your people. Love your fellow as yourself. I am Adonai.
And so now we prepare for the lifting of our Torah and the redressing of her. And I have the honor of inviting up Rabbi Ruth and Rabbi Jason as our Hagba and our Golel. Ya'amdu hamigvia v'hagolelet. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai veyad Moshe. Hey, 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 hey. We now turn to the reading of our Haftarah, the story of Jonah, someone who kept turning away and turning away when we talk so much during the High Holy Days about returning again. But Jonah kept running further and further. As we get to these last few verses that we are going to read from the book of Jonah, we hear God ask a question of Jonah, asking in this moment, should I not then have a compassion for the great city of Nineveh, a place of so many thousands of people, being unable to tell them right from them left? God asks Jonah this, trying to understand Jonah's plight amidst everything that is going on. But we're left with just that, a question. And so I ask you, if you were Jonah in this moment, if this was today and you were sitting under that leaf wondering, where should I go next? How would you respond? What would you do? We begin our reading of the Haftarah. You can find the blessing on page 342, and we'll be reading verses 9 through 11, which can be found on page 349. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק.
Amen.
ויאמר אלוהים אל יונה ההיטיב הרע לך על הקיקיון ויאמר היטיב הרע לי עד מוות. ויאמר אדוני אתה חטא הסתה על הקיקיון אשר לא עמלת בו ולא גידלתו שבין לילה היה ובין לילה עבד ואני לא אחוס על נינווה העיר הגדולה אשר יש בה הרבה מ12 ריבו אדם אשר לא ידע בין ימינו לשמאלו ובהמה רבה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ודברך אמת וקיים לעד ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוחל וסולח לעונתנו ולעונות עמו בית ישראל ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Amen. Yasher koach.
Beginning with verse 5. Then Jonah left the city and found a place east of the city, made himself a shelter there, and sat under it in the shade until he might see what would become of the city. Now Adonai Elohim provided a gourd and made it rise over Jonah to give shade for his head and rescue him from his evil situation. And Jonah rejoiced with great joy because of the gourd. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm that attacked the gourd and it withered. As the sun rose, God provided an oppressive wind from the east. And the sun beat down on Jonah's head, making him faint. He begged for death, saying, "It is better for me to die than to live." Then God said to Jonah, "Are you good and angry about the gourd?" And he said, "I'm good and angry to the point of death." Then Adonai said, "You pitied the gourd, which you neither worked nor grew, which appeared overnight and perished overnight. Should I then not have compassion for the great city of Nineveh, place of more than 120,000 human beings unable to tell their right hand from their left, and many beasts.
And on that quizzical note, we're ready to return Torah to the Ark. Rabbis, if you'll open the Ark.
יהללו את שם אדוני, כי נשכב שמו לכבדו. כי לקח טוב נתתי להם, תורתי תעזובו. עץ חיים היא, למחזיקים בה, ותומך מאושר. דרכך, דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיך שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם.
This concludes our Torah service. And as a concluding nechemta, or note of comfort, I'd like to share with you something I just read. I'll be paraphrasing it from Rabbi Joachim Prince, who spoke with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington. And Rabbi Prince said, neighbor is more a moral concept than a geographic reality. If only we can remember this in the year ahead, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to begin with the love of self, to turn to the love of others, and in that, in loving ourselves and others, we will learn to more deeply love God. Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai elecha, v'nashuva, v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem.
We're so glad that you joined us for this portion of our day as we explored the sacred texts of our tradition. We'll continue to move through this day of days together. So we invite you to take a moment to take a break, and we'll see you again at the next service.